In the beginning there was nothing, a vast expanse known as the Ginnungagap, a yawning void devoid of sand, sea, earth, or sky. The void, immense and gaping, had its limits. Above it lay a realm of heat and fire, while below a realm of cold and mist awaited. As time flowed on, rivers known as the Alivagar began to surge upward from the north, carrying with them a toxic substance that froze into ice within the void. This ice emitted poisonous vapors that crystallized into salty rime, continuously expanding and filling the emptiness. Meanwhile, the hot winds from the southern realm reached the void, and as they drew nearer to the icy expanse, something remarkable happened. The heat melted some of the solid salty rime, birthing a primordial ooze from which life would eventually emerge. The first being to take form was Ymir, the giant known as Orgelmir, a hermaphroditic entity capable of giving birth to giants, both male and female, alongside hideous monsters like a six-headed beast. Ymir nourished himself on the milk of the primordial cow Audumbla, who also emerged from the primordial goo. While Ymir fed, Audumbla sustained herself by licking the solid salty rime. In a miraculous process that unfolded over 3 days, Audumbla revealed Buri, a being of beauty and strength. His emergence marked the dawn of the gods. Buri fathered a son named Bor, who united with the giantess Bestla to conceive 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. Though the origins of Yggdrasil, the mighty ash tree that became the backbone of the universe, remain a mystery, it likely sprouted from the same primordial goo. Yggdrasil's roots reach deep into the north, nourished by 3 wells: Urdabrunner, the well of destiny; Mimisbrunner, the well of wisdom; and Vergelmir, the well of fire. For a time, the world thrived with gods, giants, and primordial beings. But as the giants multiplied, the 3 brothers grew concerned. Ymir's asexual reproduction meant that the giants quickly outnumbered the gods, and while doesn't depict them as overtly threatening, their chaotic nature was a cause for alarm. To address this giant menace, Odin and his brothers slaying Ymir. His body released such a torrent of blood that it created a flood, wiping out nearly all giants and drastically reducing their numbers. With Ymir's remains, the brothers crafted the earth, placing it at the heart of Yggdrasil. They formed the land and mountains from Ymir's flesh and bones, used his blood to create the sea, and hung his skull above the new world as the sky. Sparks and flames from Muspelheim were scattered within Ymir's skull to form the stars, while the remnants of his brains became the clouds. In the end, they shaped a circular disk. The barren outskirts were given to the giants, a desolate realm, known as Jotunheim, while the fertile inner land was named Midgard or Middle-earth. They separated Midgard from Jotunheim using Ymir's eyebrows as a protective fence. Finally, Odin and his brothers created mankind to inhabit their new world, marking the dawn of human existence in this carefully crafted cosmos. The first humans, Ask and Embla, emerged from twigs found on a riverbank, their names meaning ash tree and vine. Initially lifeless, they were infused with life by 3 gods. Odin bestowed souls, Hoenir granted senses, and Lothar imparted warmth and a divine hue. From these humble beginnings, Ask and Embla became the ancestors of all humanity. These were just 2 of the 9 worlds nestled in the roots and branches of Yggdrasil. To the south lay the world of fire, known as Muspelheim. In their creation of Midgard, Odin and his brothers sealed off this realm from the rest of existence, confining a race of fire giants, distinct from the frost giants of Jotunheim, within it. Their formidable leader, Surtur, stands guard at the gates of Muspelheim, ever vigilant for the moment they might open. In stark contrast, the northern world was defined as Niflheim, inhabited by various creatures. Among its shadows lurks Nidhogg, a great dragon that gnaws at the roots of Yggdrasil, inflicting immense pain upon the great tree. The Norns, the Norse, fates also dwell in Niflheim at the Well of Destiny, where they weave the fates of individuals into the bark of Yggdrasil using runes. In pursuit of wisdom, Odin once hung himself from Yggdrasil for 9 days and nights, unraveling the secrets of the runes, which he later imparted to humanity. After his death, Odin would place the disembodied head of his friend Mimir at the Well of Wisdom, Helheim, the underworld, was likely nestled within Niflheim or nearby among Yggdrasil's roots. It perhaps emerged following Ymir's death, crafted to accommodate the numerous giants who perished in the Great Flood. Meanwhile, Odin and his kin, the Aesir, established their home in a realm closer to the top of Yggdrasil, naming it Asgard. Another tribe of gods, the Vanir, chose to dwell in Vanaheim, possibly descendants of one of Odin's brothers. In the early days, the Aesir and Vanir clashed in war, but they eventually forged a peace agreement that involved the exchange of hostages, bringing key Vanir figures, like the twins Freya and Freyr, into Asgard. After the war, the Aesir fortified Asgard against the giants rather than the Vanir, and built the Rainbow Bifrost Bridge to connect Asgard with Midgard, allowing them to protect humanity. The origins of the other realms in the Norse cosmos are not well documented. However, the elves found their home in Alfheim, sometimes regarded as gods or divine ancestors, possibly the offspring of another of Odin's brothers. Meanwhile, the dark elves, commonly known as dwarves, thrived in Svartalfheim, a shadowy underground world. Renowned for their craftsmanship, they created many legendary treasures, including Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. Other tales hint at the god's ongoing efforts to shape the world. The god Heimdall ventured into the world of men to establish social order. He spent a night with a poor couple, ensuring they bore children destined to become thralls and slaves. He then visited a middle-class couple, ensuring their offspring would become farmers and workers. Finally, he spent a night with an attractive and wealthy couple, ensuring their children would be earls and kings, even fostering one to teach them the art of conquest. In the heart of the Norse cosmos stands Yggdrasil, the great tree that supports the realms. Its lofty branches cradle Asgard, the stronghold of the Aesir gods, with Odin as their chief. Yggdrasil springs from the Well of Erd, a deep pool containing powerful forces and beings. Among them are the Norns, three wise maidens who shape the fates of all beings. They carve runes into Yggdrasil's trunk, and these symbols carry their intentions throughout the 9 worlds, influencing the course of destiny. Odin, observing the Norns from his seat in Asgard, envied their wisdom and power. Determined to understand the runes, he realized he must prove himself worthy of such profound knowledge. To do this, he hung himself from a branch of Yggdrasil, piercing his side with his spear, and gazed down into the shadowy waters below. He forbade any help from the other gods, not even a sip of water, and focused intently on calling to the runes. For 9 days and nights, Odin endured this ordeal, straddling the boundary between life and death. On the 9th night, he finally glimpsed shapes in the depths, the runes. They revealed themselves to him, along with their hidden secrets. In that moment of revelation, Odin let out a triumphant scream, having borne witness to their power. Having been initiated into the mysteries of the runes, Odin recounted, "Then I was fertilized and became wise. I truly grew and thrived. From a word to a word I was led to a word. From a work to a work I was led to a work." Initiated into the mysteries of the runes, Odin reflected on his experience, feeling invigorated and enlightened. He understood that through the runes, he could access immense abilities. With this newfound knowledge, he became one of the most formidable beings in existence, mastering chants that allowed him to heal emotional and physical wounds, bind his enemies, escape constraints, extinguish fires, expose dark magic, protect allies in battle, raise the dead, win love, and perform many other remarkable feats. In the realm of Jotunheim, the homeland of giants, lies Mimir's well, bubbling from deep within the earth and nourishing Yggdrasil, the world tree. Mimir, the wise guardian of memory, possessed profound knowledge. In the early days of the world, he would drink from the well each morning, using the Gjallarhorn to gather the precious water. Long ago, when the worlds were still young, Odin donned a long cloak and hat, disguising himself as a wanderer. He ventured into the land of the giants, risking his life to reach Mimir and seek wisdom. Odin approached Mimir, pleading for just a single drink from the well. However, Mimir, steadfast in his role as guardian, refused to allow anyone but himself to partake of the water. Despite Odin's claims of kinship, Mimir remained unmoved. Undeterred, Odin insisted on the importance of a drink to gain wisdom and asked what price Mimir required. Mimir's response was stark. He demanded Odin's eye in exchange for a sip from the well. Understanding the gravity of the situation and the long, perilous journey he had undertaken, Odin did not hesitate. He requested a knife, prepared to make the sacrifice. After fulfilling the requirement, he placed his eye into the pool, watching it float beneath the water's surface. With the Gjallarhorn filled with the well's water, Odin raised it to his lips. The cold liquid surged through him, flooding his mind with wisdom. With one eye, he could see farther and clearer than he ever had with two. From that moment on, Odin was known by various names: Blinder, the blind god; Heir, the one-eyed; and Balig, the flaming-eyed one. His eye remains in Mimir's well, preserved by the waters that sustain the world tree, eternally gazing, seeing nothing yet everything at once. In the ancient realms of Norse mythology, two powerful tribes of deities existed, the Aesir and the Vanir. Though they often coexisted, a time of turmoil arose, igniting fierce tensions between them. Freya, a goddess from the Vanir, was celebrated for her mastery of cider, a potent form of magic. Disguised as Heidr or Bright, she ventured into Asgard, the majestic realm of the Aesir. Her enchanting magical abilities captivated the Aesir, but soon her influence unveiled the darker side of their nature. Their traditional values of honor, loyalty, and law began to crumble, replaced by selfish desires fueled by Freya's magic. Frustrated by this transformation, the Aesir accused her of sowing discord and labeled her Gulveig, meaning gold greed. In a desperate attempt to rid themselves of her, they tried to burn her alive 3 times. Each time, however, Freya emerged unscathed from the ashes, stronger than before. This miraculous resilience ignited a fierce animosity between the Aesir and the Vanir, leading to an outright war. The Aesir, armed with conventional weapons and brute strength, clashed against the cunning and magical prowess of the Vanir. The conflict escalated, with both sides tasting victories and suffering losses, neither willing to back down. As the war dragged on, weariness set in. Tired of the endless bloodshed, both tribes sought a truce. In accordance with ancient customs, they agreed to exchange hostages as a gesture of goodwill. Freya, along with her brother Freyr and their father Njord, moved to Asgard, while Hrungnir and Mimir from the Aesir were sent to Vanaheim. While Njord and his children adapted well to their new home, the situation took a dark turn for Hrungnir and Mimir in Vanaheim. The Vanir quickly realized that while Hrungnir appeared wise, his insights only came forth in Mimir's presence. His vague advice, often reduced to phrases like "let others decide," left the Vanir feeling deceived and frustrated. In a fit of anger, they beheaded Mimir and dispatched his severed head back to Asgard. Heartbroken by this betrayal, Odin preserved Mimir's head with herbs, chanting spells over it to ensure it would continue to impart wisdom. Despite the tragic misunderstanding, both tribes recognized the futility of rekindling the war. Instead, they decided to unite, symbolizing their newfound commitment to harmony. They collectively spat into a cauldron, their combined saliva birthing Kvasir, the wisest being of all. This miraculous creation stood as a testament to their determination to forge a lasting peace between the Aesir and the Vanir. In the aftermath of the Aesir-Vanir War, the gods sealed their truce by spitting into a great vat, from which they created Kvasir, the wisest being to ever live. Kvasir traveled the world, sharing his vast knowledge and wisdom until he was invited to the home of 2 deceitful dwarves, Fjalar and Galar. In a cruel twist, they killed him and brewed a mead from his blood, named Odrarir, or Stirrer of Inspiration. This mead imparted wisdom, granting poetic and scholarly prowess to those who drank it. As Fjalar and Galar continued their murderous ways, they drowned the giant Gilling and later killed his wife in a fit of malice. Their actions soon caught up with them when Gilling's son Suttung discovered their treachery. Suttung captured the dwarves and, in exchange for their lives, demanded the mead they had brewed. He hid it deep within the mountain Hnitbjorg, entrusting its guard to his Daughter Odin, the chief of the gods, was determined to obtain this precious mead. Disguised as a wandering farmhand named Bolverker, he approached Suttung's brother Baugi. There he offered to sharpen the scythes of 9 servants, but with a cunning twist. When they eagerly accepted, he threw his whetstone into the air, leading to their demise in a chaotic scramble. Odin then proposed to Baugi that he would work in place of the dead servants in exchange for a sip of the mead. While Baugi initially hesitated, he agreed to help Odin after witnessing his remarkable strength and skill. After completing his work, Odin convinced Baugi to assist him in reaching Suttung. Using an auger, they drilled into the mountain, but Baugi, driven by treachery, tried to deceive Odin about their progress. However, Odin saw through the giant's lies and forced him to finish the hole. Once inside, Odin transformed into a handsome young man and charmed Gunnlod. He struck a bargain with her. If he slept with her for 3 nights, she would grant him 3 sips of the mead. After fulfilling his promise, Odin drank deeply from the 3 vats, savoring the divine wisdom contained within. Transformed into an eagle, Odin flew back to Asgard, but Suttung, realizing the deceit, took on the form of an eagle and pursued him. As Odin approached the god's stronghold, they readied vessels to catch the precious mead. Just before Suttung could catch him, Odin regurgitated the mead into the vessels. However, a few drops fell to Midgard, the world of humans, becoming the source of mediocre poetry and wisdom. In contrast, the true poets and scholars are those who receive Odin's special gift of the mead bestowed upon them personally, ensuring that the legacy of inspiration continues. One day Loki, known for his mischievous nature, decided to stir up trouble and cut off the beautiful golden hair of Sif, the wife of Thor. When Thor discovered what Loki had done, his temper flared, and he grabbed Loki, threatening to break every bone in his body out of rage. In a desperate bid for mercy, Loki pleaded with the thunder god, asking for a chance to travel to Svartalfheim, the dark and mysterious home of the dwarves. He promised that he could persuade these master craftsmen to create an even more stunning head of hair for Sif. Thor, still furious but intrigued, agreed to let Loki go, and off he went to seek the dwarves' help. In the realm of the dwarves, known as Svartalfheim, Loki encountered the sons of Ivaldi. They crafted not only a new head of golden hair for Sif, but also 2 remarkable treasures: a magical boat named Skidbladnir, which could fold up into a pocket and always provided a favorable wind for sailing, and Gungnir, a powerful spear inscribed with runes, known as the deadliest spear in the universe. Although Loki had successfully completed his mission and could have returned to Thor with the gifts, his curiosity got the better of him. He stayed longer, eager to see what more treasures the skilled dwarves could produce. With mischief in mind, he approached the brothers Brokkr and Sindri, taunting them about their abilities to create items as magnificent as those made by Ivaldi's sons, and bet them that they could not craft gifts that would rival those of Ivaldi's sons. If they could, Loki said they could cut off his head. Sindri began his work by placing gold in the forge, while Brokkr worked the bellows. Loki, disguised as a fly, bit Brokkr's neck hard enough to distract him, but Brokkr persevered through the pain. When Sindri returned, they produced a magnificent ring called Draupnir, which would create 8 new golden rings every 9th night, ensuring wealth for its owner. Next, Sindri put iron in the forge and repeated his earlier commands. Loki, not to be outdone, bit Brokkr on the eyelid, drawing blood and forcing him to pause to wipe his eyes. When Sindri came back, he pulled out Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. Although its handle was shorter than intended, they knew its value was immense. The brothers made their way to Asgard to claim their reward. Loki went ahead and presented the treasures to the gods. They unanimously agreed, except for Loki, that Mjolnir was the finest object ever created. Realizing he was in trouble due to his wager with the dwarves, Loki began to devise an escape plan. As the gods claimed their treasures, Sif got the golden hair, Thor received Mjolnir, Odin took Gungnir and Draupnir, and Freyr gained Skidbladnir, and the Borgullinbursti. The dwarven brothers approached Loki, demanding the price he had agreed upon, his head. In a clever twist, Loki pointed out that while he had promised his head, he had not agreed to give them his neck. The dwarves couldn't take his head without harming his neck, thus nullifying their deal. Unable to claim Loki's head, the brothers sought compensation instead. With the gods' consent, they sewed Loki's mouth shut, preventing him from scheming and lying, at least for a time, before returning to their forge. In this thrilling tale of mischief and cunning, we see Loki's antics lead to unexpected treasures and clever escapes, all while showcasing the remarkable craftsmanship of the dwarves. The gods were thrilled to be constructing their grand halls and palaces atop the mountains. However, their excitement was soon interrupted by the arrival of a mysterious stranger. Odin, the father of the gods, approached this enigmatic figure, who claimed to know of their plans to build a city. While he could not create a palace, he offered to construct an indestructible wall around Asgard. Odin, intrigued, inquired about the timeline for such a feat. The stranger confidently replied that he could complete the wall in just a year. Recognizing the immense advantage of having a formidable wall, Odin accepted the offer and brought the stranger before the council of the gods. The stranger swore he would finish the wall within the year, and in return, Odin promised him any reward he desired. The next day, the stranger arrived with only himself and a remarkable horse. To the gods' astonishment, the horse proved to be far more than a mere laborer. It expertly set stones into place and worked tirelessly night and day. As the construction progressed, the wall began to take shape, and the gods grew increasingly. Concerned about the stranger's reward, Odin, worried about the stranger's intentions, sought to learn what he desired. The stranger's demands were shocking. He wanted the sun, the moon, and Freya, the goddess of beauty, as his wife. Furious at the audacity of these demands, Odin refused and convened with the other gods, who were equally horrified at the thought of losing such treasures. As despair settled in, Loki, the cunning trickster god, proposed a plan. He suggested allowing the stranger to build the wall, but urged that they clarify the conditions of the bargain. The wall would need to be completed by the first day of summer. If even one stone was missing, the stranger would forfeit his claim. Odin returned to the stranger to relay this new condition. The stranger, unfazed, seemed to relish the challenge, asserting his belief that the gods held too much power and that he was merely seeking balance. With construction progressing rapidly, the giant and his horse worked tirelessly. As the first day of summer approached, the wall was nearly complete, with only the gateway left to finish. The giant, confident of victory, instructed his horse to bring a final heavy stone to the gateway. That night, as the giant slept, Svadilfari, the horse, toiled away. But then he encountered a beautiful mare, who enticed him with playful banter. Tired from his relentless labor, Svadilfari decided to abandon his work to follow the mare, forgetting his duties and the wall's completion. They frolicked together through the moonlit meadows and eventually found a secluded cave, where they spent the night immersed in joy and laughter. The mare's charm captivated Svadilfari, and they lost track of time. Meanwhile, the giant awoke to find his horse missing and the final stone unplaced. Frantically searching the mountainside and beyond, he realized that Svadilfari was nowhere to be found. Time ran out, and with it the giant's chance to claim his extravagant reward. The gods breathed a sigh of relief, knowing they had outsmarted the stranger and avoided a dire fate. As the first day of summer dawned, sunlight streamed through the gap in the gateway, but the final stone was still missing. The gods felt a flicker of hope. If the wall remained unfinished by evening, Sul, Mani, and Freya would be safe. As the hours passed, the sun sank lower in the sky and Svadilfari, the horse, had still not returned. The giant stood furiously before the wall, realizing that without his horse, he lacked the strength to carry the heavy stone, let alone place it in the gateway. Evening approached, and the giant reluctantly faced the council of the gods. Odin, barely concealing his satisfaction, informed the giant that his work was incomplete. The bargain he had struck was now void, and he would receive no reward from the gods. The Aesir then paid the giant the wages they deemed he deserved. Frustration boiled over in the giant, and he raged against the gods, declaring that while he had built an impenetrable wall, his hands were still capable of destroying their precious palaces. In a fit of anger, he charged forward, ready to unleash his fury on Asgard's structures. However, the gods swiftly intervened, a fatal blow from Thor's hammer, which shattered his head into pieces no bigger than breadcrumbs. With the giant gone, the gods rejoiced, filling their cups with the finest mead and celebrating their victory with songs that echoed through the air. Their merriment was soon interrupted by Loki's arrival, prompting a wave of curiosity about how he had managed to thwart the giant. Loki leaned back, reveling in the attention as he revealed his clever plan. He had transformed himself into a beautiful Mare, leading Svadilfari down the mountain, rendering the giant powerless without his horse. The gods erupted in laughter, raising their cups to Loki's cunning nature. After few months, Loki gave birth to a stunning eight-legged foal who was named Sleipnir, an eight-legged horse of Odin. That night, they celebrated their safety behind the Great Wall, feeling thankful for Loki's quick thinking. Yet amid the festivities, Odin observed the celebration with a heavy heart. While the wall stood firm, it was built on a foundation of broken oaths, and the injustice of the situation weighed heavily on him. The victory felt bittersweet as he grappled with the consequences of their choices in the glorious realm of Asgard. The trickster god Loki fathered 3 fearsome children with the giantess Angerboda, each embodying great power and menace. Their first child was the Fenrir, a monstrous wolf. The second was serpent Jörmungandr, and the third was Hel, the goddess of death. The gods were deeply troubled by the fates of these beings. They foresaw that Jörmungandr would ultimately kill Thor during Ragnarok, the cataclysmic end of the world, while Hel would play a role in keeping the radiant god Baldur trapped in the underworld. Fenrir too was prophesied to devour Odin, the chief of the gods. To prevent this impending doom, the gods took drastic measures. They cast Jörmungandr into the ocean, where he grew so large that he encircled Midgard, the realm of humans. Hel was banished to the underworld, but the gods were too fearful of Fenrir to let him roam free. Instead, they raised him in their stronghold, Asgard. Only Tyr, the god of law and honor, dared to approach and feed the growing wolf. As time passed, Fenrir grew rapidly, and the gods realized they could no longer keep him in Asgard. Fearing the destruction he would cause if left untethered, they attempted to bind him with various chains. Each time they convinced Fenrir to break free, claiming the chains were merely tests of his strength, and he willingly accepted their challenges. Finally, the gods sent a messenger to Svartalfheim, the home of the dwarves known for their unparalleled craftsmanship. The dwarves created a magical chain called Gleipnir, made from impossible materials. The sound of a cat's footsteps, a woman's beard, the roots of mountains, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. These elements were so elusive that Fenrir would have no chance of escaping. When the gods presented Gleipnir to Fenrir, he grew suspicious and refused to be bound unless one of them would place their hand in his jaws as a pledge of trust. The other gods hesitated, knowing that this would likely cost one of them a hand. Finally, the brave Tyr stepped forward and offered his hand for the sake of all life. Once Fenrir was bound with Gleipnir, he realized he had been tricked and bit off Tyr's hand in anger. The gods then took Fenrir to a remote location where they secured him to a boulder and placed a sword in his jaws to keep them open. As he howled in rage, a river of drool named Expectation Vantir flowed from his mouth, and thus Fenrir remained in this wretched state, waiting for the day of Ragnarok when he would finally break free. And so, the tale of Loki's children comes to a close. Frigga, the queen of the gods, had a deep love for beautiful adornments. Her desire for a new necklace led her down a troubling path. Secretly, she stole a piece of gold from a statue of her husband, Odin, which had just been placed in his temple. She entrusted this gold to the dwarfs, asking them to create a stunning necklace. Once completed, the necklace was so magnificent that it not only enhanced Frigga's beauty, but also deepened Odin's affection for her. However, when Odin discovered the theft, he was furious. He summoned the dwarfs and demanded to know who had dared to touch his statue. Loyal to Frigga, the dwarfs refused to speak. Frustrated by their silence, Odin decided to place the statue above the temple gate and devised runes to give it the power of speech, intending for it to reveal the thief. Fearing Odin's wrath, Frigga turned to her trusted attendant, Fulla, for help. Fulla quickly returned with a grotesque dwarf who offered to silence the statue if Frigga would smile upon him. Grateful, Frigga granted his wish. The dwarf then sneaked into the temple, cast a deep sleep over the guards, and shattered the statue, ensuring it could never expose Frigga's crime despite Odin's efforts. Odin discovered the broken statue and was enraged. In his fury, he left Asgard, taking with him the blessings he usually bestowed upon gods and humans. During his absence, his brothers seized the opportunity to impersonate him and claimed his throne and wife. Despite their resemblance to Odin, they lacked his power to restore the blessings, allowing the ice giants or Jotuns to invade the earth. These giants brought a harsh winter, withering leaves, stripping trees, and covering the land in snow and mist. After 7 long months, the true Odin returned. Upon seeing the devastation caused by his absence, he drove away the usurpers, forced the frost giants to release their grip on the earth, and restored warmth and light, showering blessings upon the land once more. He had longed for Frigga during his absence, and upon his return he enveloped her in love and lavish gifts. As the revered mother of all gods, she reclaimed her rightful place by his side as his queen, united once more in harmony and devotion. And so, the tale of Frigga's desire and Odin's fury unfolds, reminding us of the intricate balance of love, trust, and the consequences of our actions. Thor, the god of thunder and mightiest of all the Aesir, felt an unsettling emptiness as he awoke. His hand instinctively reached for his hammer, Mjolnir, a treasured weapon crafted by the dwarfs Brock and Eitri. It was a powerful tool that could destroy anything it hit, always returned to his hand, and could even shrink to fit inside his shirt. Yet as he opened his eyes and searched the room, he found no sign of his beloved hammer. Realizing his hammer was gone, Thor considered the possibilities. His first thought turned to Loki, the trickster god, but he dismissed the notion that Loki would dare to steal Mjolnir. Instead, he sought Loki for guidance. Loki, always cunning, agreed to investigate the matter. Loki visited Freya, the most beautiful of the gods, and requested her feathered cloak that granted the ability to fly. She initially refused, valuing the cloak above gold, but upon hearing that Thor's hammer had been stolen, she consented to lend it to him. Transforming into a falcon, Loki soared beyond Asgard into the land of the giants. There he spotted a massive grave mound where Thrym, the ugliest of giants, was busy plaiting a dog collar. Upon landing, Loki inquired about the missing hammer, and Thrym, with a sinister grin, revealed that he had hidden Mjolnir deep beneath the earth. He demanded Freya's hand in marriage as the price for the hammer. Loki returned to Thor with the news, revealing that Thrym wanted to marry Freya in exchange for the hammer. Thor, unconvinced that Freya would agree to such a proposal, found himself in a challenging situation. They approached Freya with the plan, but she was furious at the very thought of marrying an ogre. Thor and Loki gathered the gods to discuss their predicament. After much debate, Heimdall offered a suggestion that none were likely to enjoy, dressing Thor as a bride to deceive Thrym. Despite Thor's strong objections, the plan was deemed necessary for the retrieval of Mjolnir. Goddesses dressed Thor in the finest bridal attire, complete with Freya's necklace, a bridal crown, and a veil to conceal his identity. Loki transformed into a maidservant to accompany Thor to the land of the giants. They arrived at Thrym's hall, where giants prepared for the wedding feast. Thrym's booming voice commanded attention, and as Thor attempted to maintain his disguise, he grew increasingly uncomfortable. The feast commenced, with Thor devouring food at an astonishing rate, while Loki expertly diverted attention from Thor's unusual appetite. As Thrym grew more enamored with the disguised Thor, he inquired about the bride's striking eyes, mistaking their fire for passion. Loki seized the moment to explain that Thor had been so eager to marry him that he hadn't slept for 8 days. Finally, the moment arrived for the hammer to be presented. As it was placed on Thor's lap, Thrym demanded declarations of love. Instead, Thor, gripping the familiar handle of Mjolnir, erupted into laughter and declared that Thrym should not have taken his hammer. With a single mighty swing, Thor struck Thrym down, vanquishing all the giants and ogres in the hall. After the chaos subsided, Thor shed his bridal attire, relieved to reclaim his hammer and satisfied with the meal he had enjoyed. With a light heart, he proclaimed his readiness to return home. One day while Odin was away, Freyr the Vanir god took a seat on Odin's throne Hlithskjalf, granting him the ability to see across the 9 worlds. As he gazed upon Jotunheim, the land of the giants, he spotted a beautiful house belonging to the sea giant Mimir. A lovely young giantess named Gerd entered the house, capturing Freya's heart. Freya became infatuated with Gerd, but he kept his feelings to himself. Perhaps he was ashamed to admit he had sat on the forbidden throne, or he understood that love between giants and Aesir was frowned upon. As Freya grew increasingly despondent, refusing to eat or drink, his family began to worry, though they were hesitant to confront him. Eventually, his father Njord summoned Freya's loyal servant, Skirnir, to uncover the issue. After some persuasion, Freya revealed his secret longing for Gerd. In response, he asked Skirnir to woo the giantess on his behalf, and promised him a magical horse that could traverse the fiery barrier surrounding Gymir's home, as well as a special sword that would fight giants on its own. Skirnir is sent to Jotunheim as a messenger for the lovesick Freyr, who wishes to woo the giantess Gerda. He first offers Gerda golden apples, which she rejects, stating that she and Freya can never be together. He then presents a magical ring that produces more gold, but she declines, mentioning her father's wealth. Frustrated, Skirnir resorts to threats, warning Gerda of dire consequences if she doesn't accept Freya's love. He threatens her life and that of her father, describing a grim future filled with suffering and madness. Skirnir reveals that Odin and Thor are angry with her and carves ominous runes symbolizing despair and desire. Despite his threats, Gerda ultimately offers Skirnir a crystal cup of mead, signaling her willingness to meet Freya. She agrees to meet him at a serene place called Barri after 9 nights. Upon returning to Asgard, Skirnir informs Freya of Gerda's acceptance. Freya, eager and anxious, expresses his impatience. Long is a night, long is a second, how can I suffer for 3? Often has a month seemed shorter to me than half this wedding eve. Freya married Gerda, and they had a son named Fjölnir. This is the reason for Freya so being unarmed when he fought Beli, killing him with a stag's antler. Freya's loss of his sword had long-term consequences. At Ragnarok, the end of the world, Freya was destined to fight Surtur, the fire giant, without his sword, and was defeated. Idun was a stunning goddess from the Aesir tribe, renowned as the guardian of youth-preserving apples in Asgard. On one occasion, 3 gods, Odin, Loki, and Hrungnir, set out on a journey to a remote mountain. As they traveled, they found themselves starving, having brought no food with them. Eventually, they stumbled upon a herd of oxen and decided to slaughter one for dinner. However, despite their efforts, the fire they lit couldn't cook the meat. Just then, a voice called out from a nearby tree, revealing a large eagle perched on a branch. The eagle claimed he was preventing the gods from cooking the meat, but offered to lift the spell if they shared some of the meat with him. Left with no choice, the gods reluctantly agreed, allowing the eagle to take the best cut for himself. This greedy act infuriated the gods. Loki, feeling cheated, grabbed a strong branch and hurled it at the eagle. The eagle caught the branch in its talons, and Loki found himself being lifted into the air, clinging to the other end. Terrified, Loki pleaded to be released, but the eagle refused to let him go unless Loki promised to help Thiazi, the giant who was in the form of an eagle at a moment. In desperation, Loki agreed to the eagle's terms. When the 3 gods returned to Asgard, Loki immediately sought out Idun. He deceived her by claiming he had discovered even more magnificent fruits than hers and urged her to come with him to compare them. Trusting Loki, Idun followed him, only to be captured by Thiazi, who had transformed into an eagle. He flew her high into the mountains to his fortress, Thrymheim, or Home of Thunder. As Idun remained absent, the gods noticed a drastic change among themselves. Their skin darkened, Wrinkles appeared, their hair turned grey, and they felt drained of energy. Concerned, they gathered to discuss Idun's whereabouts. They soon learned that she had last been seen with Loki, prompting them to seize him and threaten severe punishment unless he revealed what had happened to her. With no other option, Loki confessed the entire story, and the gods demanded he rescue Idun or face death. To aid in his quest, Loki borrowed a magical feather from the goddess Freya and flew to Thrymheim. Luckily, Thiazi was out fishing, leaving Idun alone in the fortress. Loki transformed her into a small peanut and carried her in his talons. However, when Thiazi returned and discovered Idun was missing, he quickly turned into an eagle and pursued Loki. As Loki approached Asgard, Thiazi was gaining on him. The gods saw the giant nearing and prepared to set fire to Asgard's walls. Just as Loki crossed the barrier, they ignited the flames, incinerating Thiazi into ashes. With Idun safely back, she brought her precious youth apples to the Norse pantheon. The gods' faces lit up with joy as they regained their beauty and vitality, grateful for Idun's return. Thiazi, the giant who kidnapped Idun and stole the magic apples, had a daughter named Skadi. Unlike most giantesses, who were typically cruel and spiteful, Skadi was both beautiful and a fierce warrior, though she harbored a desire for vengeance. Against the Aesir for her father's death, her true strength lay in her love for Balder, the beloved god admired by all. Skadi understood that as a giantess, she would never be accepted by the gods of Asgard, who had long viewed her race as enemies, making her feelings for Balder all the more poignant. After her father Thiazi was killed by the Aesir, Skadi devised a clever plan. She donned her helm and armor and set out for Asgard, seeking reparation for her father's death. Meanwhile, the gods were joyfully feasting in Valhalla, celebrating Idun's safe return. Their merriment was suddenly interrupted when Skadi, clad in silver armor and wielding a spear as long as a ship's mast, strode into their hall. Heimdall, the vigilant watchman, was surprised he had allowed her to cross the Bifrost Bridge unnoticed. The Aesir quickly set down their cups, their laughter fading as they beheld her formidable presence. The 9 Valkyries, Odin's warrior maidens, rushed to don their own armor, unwilling to appear meek before the towering Skadi, eager to show off their battle attire. The Aesir, recognizing Skadi's loss, offered her compensation to maintain peace. Skadi, standing confidently in her armor, requested 2 things: the right to choose her husband from among them, and a promise to make her laugh, as grief had long clouded her joy. The gods were taken aback by her requests. None were eager to marry a giantess, no matter how striking. After much deliberation, they agreed to let her choose a husband, albeit in a unique way. The gods would line up behind a curtain so she could only see their feet. Skadi was excited, believing she could easily identify Balder's beautiful feet. As she walked back and forth, she spotted a pair she deemed the fairest and pointed to them, convinced they belonged to Balder. However, to her surprise, she had chosen Njord, the wealthy king of the ocean winds, father of Frey and Freya, rather than the handsome Balder. Laughter erupted from the other gods at this unexpected twist. Just then, Loki entered the hall riding one of Thor's goat steeds. He entertained everyone with hilarious antics involving the old grey-bearded goat, causing Skadi, the Aesir, and even Njord to double over with laughter. In the end, Skadi acknowledged her defeat, wiping tears of joy from her eyes. She declared that she would remember Loki's cleverness and vowed to get even with him one day, a promise she ultimately fulfilled during Loki's punishment. Skadi married Njord, but neither was truly willing, and their union was far from a fairy tale. They moved to Skadi's mountain home, once Thiazi's palace, but struggled to find happiness together. Njord had difficulty accepting Skadi as a giantess, and their lack of love only added to their woes. The main source of conflict was their differing preferences for a home. Njord longed for the sea and wealth in Njord, while Skadi cherished the mountains. They eventually compromised, splitting their time between the 2 places, 9 days in Thrymheim and 3 in Njord. However, even this arrangement failed to bring them peace. One day, after returning from Skadi's mountain home to Njord's sea palace, the couple had a fierce argument. Njord expressed his disdain for Skadi's mountains, lamenting the howling, wolves and preferring the songs of swans on his beloved ocean. Skadi, in turn, complained about the noisy seabirds that disrupted her sleep. Their disagreement escalated, and in a fit of rage, Njord told Skadi to return to her mountains, stating he wouldn't follow her. So Skadi went back to Thrymheim alone, taking residence in her late father's palace. Embracing her independence, she became a skilled huntress, adept on skis and skates, hunting the wild beasts of the snow-covered mountains. Known as the ski goddess, Skadi never returned to Asgard. Alone in her cold domain, she became a powerful warrior, forever cherishing the memory of Balder, the beautiful god she had lost due to her unfortunate choice. I hope you enjoyed this captivating tale from Norse mythology, shedding light on the intriguing story of Skadi, the ski goddess. Her journey of love, loss, and independence paints a vivid picture of strength and resilience. The tale unfolds with Odin seated on his throne in Asgard, Hlithskjolf, where he surveys all of existence. At this moment he is watching over two brothers, Agnarr and Geiroth, whom he and his wife Frigg nurtured years ago. Sons of a king from an undisclosed land, decide to go fishing. However, a fierce storm sweeps them away, wrecking their boat on an unfamiliar shore. There they are rescued by an elderly couple who, unbeknownst to the boys, are actually Frigg and Odin in disguise. The couple chooses to foster the brothers separately. The woman cares for 10-year-old Agnarr, who is destined to succeed his father as king, while the man takes in 8-year-old Geiroth, imparting to him a wisdom that remains unspecified. After spending a winter with the couple, Odin, sensing the time has come for the boys to return home, crafts a boat for them. Before they set sail, Odin whispers a secret into Geiroth's ear. Upon their return, Geiroth, fueled by the wisdom he gained, leaps from the boat and curses Agnarr, sending him to a place of darkness before pushing the boat back out to sea. When Geiroth arrives at their kingdom, he learns that his father has passed away during the winter, and he is subsequently crowned king. Years later, Odin revels in the outcome, boasting that while Agnarr, Frigg's chosen one, lives in a cave and fathers children with a giantess, Geiroth now sits on the throne that rightfully belonged to his brother. This narrative highlights significant themes. Frigg, known for her foresight, chose to foster Agnarr, possibly because she foresaw his royal destiny and aimed to prepare him for leadership. In contrast, Odin, ever the challenger, seems intent on altering fate by placing Geiroth on the throne, believing that by imparting wisdom and a secret, he could provoke betrayal and shift the course of destiny. Unimpressed by Odin's boasting, Frigg counters that Geiroth is a miserly king, neglecting the basic tenets of hospitality and allowing his guests to suffer from hunger whenever he deems their numbers too great. She highlights that while Odin may have altered fate, it was clearly not for the better. Eager to prove her wrong, Odin declares that he will visit Geiroth in disguise to demonstrate that the king knows how to treat his guests properly. The couple engages in an unspecified wager regarding the outcome of this visit. To ensure that her expectations come to fruition, Frigg sends her maid, Fula, to warn Geiroth of an approaching dangerous sorcerer intent on bewitching him. Fula tells Geiroth that he will recognize the sorcerer because no dogs will bark at him, a trait characteristic of all gods, which Frigg cleverly uses to her advantage. Soon, Odin arrives disguised as a traveler named Grimnir, clad in a blue cloak. When he requests an audience with Geiroth, the guard dogs remain silent, signaling his divine nature. Geiroth, recognizing the anomaly, has him captured and bound for interrogation. When Grimnir refuses to divulge his purpose, Geiroth orders him to be tortured by forcing him to sit between two blazing fires, which scorch his cloak away. Grimnir endures this torment for 8 days without food or drink, steadfastly refusing to speak. Eventually, Geiroth's son, also named Agnarr in honor of his betrayed uncle, takes pity on the captive and brings him a horn of mead. This act of kindness provides Odin with the opportunity he had been waiting for. Odin reveals his true identity. To Agnarr, sharing tales of the realms of the gods and the structure of the universe, he promises the boy that he will be rewarded for his compassion. When Geiroth comes to see what has transpired, Odin admonishes him for his unkingly behavior and ominously prophesies his death. Terrified, Gerd draws his sword, but in his panic he stumbles, causing the blade to twist in his hand. He inadvertently falls upon his own sword and meets his end. With Gerd gone, his son Agnarr is proclaimed king, and the balance of fate is restored, placing Agnarr rightfully on the throne. While traveling far from Asgard in his chariot drawn by 2 he-goats, Thor and Loki sought shelter for the night at the home of a farmer and his family. To repay their hospitality, Thor offered his goats for dinner, knowing he could revive them afterward. After the meal, he instructed the farmer's children, Thialfi and Röska, to place the bones on the goats' hides once they had finished eating. However, Thialfi, eager to enjoy the marrow, broke open one of the goat's leg bones before placing it on the hide. The next morning, Thor consecrated the hides and bones with his hammer, bringing the goats back to life. One goat, though, was now lame. Realizing what had happened, Thor became furious and would have punished the family if not for their offer of Thialfi and Röska as his servants. Thor accepted their offer, and they continued their journey, leaving the injured goats behind. Their goal was to reach Jotunheim, the land of the giants. After crossing an ocean and traversing a thick forest, they arrived at a massive hall just as night fell. Finding no one inside, they decided to spend the night there. They were soon jolted awake by what felt like an earthquake. Rushing outside, they discovered a giant sleeping nearby, his snores causing the ground to tremble. Thor, who loathed giants, readied his hammer, but the giant Skrimir awoke and seemed amused at their presence. He introduced himself, already knowing who they were. Skrimir picked up his glove, which Thor and his companions had mistaken for a haul, and offered to accompany them. Thor agreed, and they continued their journey through forests and hills. That night, they took shelter under an ancient oak. When it was time to open the provisions, Thor found himself unable to untie Skrimir's knots. Frustrated, he struck the giant on the forehead, but Skrimir merely remarked that he felt a leaf fall on him. As the night wore on, Skrimir's snores became so loud that they echoed through the valleys. Annoyed and still wanting to kill the giant, Thor tried again to strike him, but Skrimir awoke, attributing the disturbance to birds. Just before dawn, Thor attempted one last time to kill him, only to have the giant ask if dirt had fallen on him from the branches above. After parting ways with Skrimir, Thor and his companions pressed on toward the castle of Utgard. By midday, they reached their destination but found the gate locked. They slipped through the bars and entered a hall filled with giant men who were eating and drinking. The king of the castle, Utgard-Loki, recognized them immediately and mocked their small size. In an attempt to save face, Loki boasted that he could eat faster than anyone there. Utgard-Loki challenged him to a contest against Logi, the embodiment of fire. They both sat at either end of a trough filled with meat. Although they met in the middle at the same time, Loki had consumed not just the meat, but also the trough itself, resulting in Loki's defeat. Next, Thialfi, known for his speed, challenged anyone to a race. Utgard-Loki appointed a young man named Hugi to compete against him. In their first race, Hugi was so fast that he doubled back to meet Thialfi before he reached the finish line. In the second race, Hugi was far ahead, and in the third, Thialfi didn't even make it halfway. Thor then declared he would engage in a drinking contest. Utgard-Loki presented him with a large horn, explaining that only the greatest drinkers could finish it in one gulp. Thor drank deeply, but when he paused, he barely noticed any difference in the level of the liquid. He attempted a second time and managed to lower the level somewhat, but still had much left. After a third attempt, Thor was unable to drink anymore. Utgard-Loki then suggested that Thor lift his cat from the floor. However, even with all his strength, Thor could only lift one of the cat's paws, which turned out to be the Midgard serpent encircling the earth. In a fit of rage, Thor demanded to wrestle anyone in the castle, and Utgard-Loki sent in an old woman named Ellie, who represented old age. Despite his might, Thor lost this match as well. Afterward, Utgard-Loki decided that no more contests would take place that night, and the group spent the evening in the castle. The next morning, as they prepared to leave, Utgard-Loki revealed the truths behind their challenges. He explained that the knots in his provision bag had been made of iron, and each blow Thor had aimed at him had struck the mountains, creating valleys. Loki's opponent had been fire, and Thialfi raced against Thor. The drinking horn connected to the ocean, and Thor had lowered the sea level with his attempts. The cat had been the Midgard serpent, and Thor's wrestling match had been against old age itself. With this knowledge, Utgard-Loki urged them to leave and never return. Enraged by the humiliation, Thor raised his hammer, intending to destroy Utgard-Loki and his castle, but when he turned, he found only an empty plain, with no sign of the giant or his fortress. The deities planned a grand feast with Agnarr and Ran, the benevolent sea giants who resided beneath the waves. They agreed to host the banquet, but only if the deities could provide a massive kettle to brew enough mead for all the invited guests. The deities realized that only Heimir, a giant renowned for his immense cauldron, could fulfill this requirement. Thor, the strongest and most courageous of the deities, volunteered to retrieve the cauldron, knowing that not all giants were as friendly as Aegir and Ran. Upon arriving at Hymir's home, Thor was met with a feast of 3 bulls that Hymir had slaughtered for their stay. However, the giant was taken aback when Thor devoured 2 of the bulls in one sitting, which left Hymir displeased. Consequently, he declared that they would need to go fishing for the next day's meal. The following morning, Hymir sent Thor to gather bait. In a bold move, Thor killed the largest remaining bull in Hymir's pastures, intending to use its head as bait. This infuriated Hymir even more, but he hoped that Thor's strength would prove useful on their fishing expedition. Once, they were in the boat. With Thor rowing from the stern, they set out to Hymir's usual fishing grounds. Hymir was pleased when he caught 2 whales, but Thor, eager for a bigger catch, rowed further from shore. Hymir grew anxious and warned Thor about the monstrous sea serpent, Jormungand, lurking in those waters. Undeterred, Thor pressed on. When Thor finally cast his line, a heavy silence fell over the water. Suddenly he felt a tremendous tug, shaking the boat violently. Hymir turned pale with fear, but Thor stood his ground, his feet planted so firmly that the boat began to take on water. As the serpent's head emerged, revealing the hook lodged in its mouth, Thor reached for his hammer. In a moment of panic, Hymir cut the line, causing the serpent to slip back into the depths. Furious at this missed chance to confront his greatest enemy, Thor hurled Hymir overboard in his wrath. With the 2 whales draped over his shoulders, Thor waded back to shore, retrieved Hymir's cauldron, and triumphantly returned to Asgard, ready to celebrate the feast with his fellow deities. Hrungnir, known as the Brawler, was the mightiest of all giants, embodying the spirits of darkness, winter, night, and death, often the foes of the gods. One day, Odin paid a visit to Hrungnir in Jotunheim, the realm of giants. Initially, Hrungnir did not recognize the god and marveled at the stranger whose horse could gallop through both air and water, as he had witnessed during Odin's approach. In a bold move, Odin wagered his head that his horse, the 8-legged Sleipnir, could outrun any horse in Jotunheim. Offended by this challenge, Hrungnir accepted and mounted his own steed, Gulfaxi, also known as Golden Mane. The 2 raced through muddy terrain, across streams, over steep hills, and through dense forests. Before Hrungnir realized it, he had crossed into Asgard, the home of the gods, where Odin and Sleipnir had already outpaced him. The gods welcomed the giant, inviting him to drink. As Hrungnir became intoxicated, his demeanor turned aggressive, and he boasted he would kill all the gods except for Freya and Sif, Thor's wife, intending to take them back to Jotunheim. Only Freya was brave enough to keep filling his horn with ale. Eventually, the gods grew weary of his threats and summoned Thor, who was away battling other giants. Upon his arrival, Thor lifted his hammer, ready to slay Hrungnir on the spot. The loud and brash giant accused Thor of cowardice for wanting to kill him while unarmed, claiming that Thor's honor would be greater if he accepted his challenge to a duel. Always eager to prove his strength and gain glory, Thor accepted. When the duel was set, Hrungnir marched to the battlefield near Jotunheim, clad in stone armor, wielding a stone shield and brandishing a whetstone as his weapon. Suddenly, lightning flashed and thunder echoed as Thor charged onto the scene. Thor hurled his hammer at the giant, while Hrungnir threw his whetstone in defiance. The whetstone shattered against Thor's forehead, which is said to be the origin of all flint on earth. Meanwhile, Thor's hammer struck Hrungnir, crushing the giant's head. However, a fragment of Hrungnir's whetstone lodged itself in Thor's forehead. Seeking relief, Thor approached the sorceress Groa, who began chanting spells to remove the stone. As Thor shared joyful news, including the return of Groa's long-lost husband, she became overwhelmed with emotion and forgot her incantations. Consequently, the stone remained stuck in Thor's forehead until his demise at Ragnarok. Baldur, one of the most cherished gods, known for his kindness, joy, and bravery. As the son of Odin, the chief god, and the gentle sorceress Frigg, Baldur brought happiness to all who knew him. However, he began to experience troubling dreams, foretelling his doom, prompting the other gods to seek understanding. Odin quickly mounted his eight-legged horse, Sleipnir, and rode to the underworld to consult a wise dead seeress. Upon arriving in the shadowy realm, he found a grand feast prepared, and the seeress revealed that Baldur was to be the guest of honor, though she only realized the gravity of her words when she understood who Odin truly was. Heavy-hearted, Odin returned to Asgard and shared the grim news with the other gods. In a desperate attempt to protect her beloved son, Frigg sought oaths from every being in existence to ensure Baldur's safety. Once she secured these promises, the gods began to playfully throw various objects at Baldur, who remained unharmed. As everyone laughed at his invincibility, yet Loki, the cunning and treacherous god, saw an opportunity for mischief. Disguised, he approached Frigg and inquired if every entity had sworn to protect Baldur. Frigg mentioned that the mistletoe had been overlooked, considering it too small and harmless to pose a threat. Seizing this chance, Loki crafted a spear from the mistletoe and approached Hoda, the blind god, encouraging him to join in the game. Under Loki's guidance, Hoda threw the mistletoe spear, which tragically struck Baldur, causing him to fall dead. The gods were left in stunned silence, realizing this marked the beginning of Ragnarok, the end of the world. Frigg, amidst her grief, asked if anyone was brave enough to venture into the land of the dead to negotiate Baldur's return. Hermod, a lesser-known son of Odin, volunteered for the perilous journey. The gods held a grand funeral for Baldur, preparing his ship, Hringhorni, as a pyre. However, the ship was stuck in the sand, and despite their efforts, they could not launch it. They called upon the giantess Hyrrokin, who arrived riding a wolf and using snakes as reins. With a powerful push, she freed the ship from the shore, and as Baldur's body was placed on board, his wife Nanna succumbed to grief and died beside him. The funeral pyre was lit, and Thor blessed the flames while Odin placed his ring Draupnir on the pyre, and Baldur's horse was led into the fire. Creatures from across the 9 worlds gathered to mourn the loss of Baldur, watching as his ship disappeared into the ocean. Meanwhile, Hermod traveled 9 nights through dark valleys to reach Hel, the realm of the dead. Upon crossing the river Gjoll, he encountered Modgud, the giantess guarding the bridge, who allowed him passage after he revealed his purpose. In Hel, Hermod found Baldur sitting beside the death goddess Hel. He pleaded for Baldur's release, and Hel agreed to return him if all beings mourned for him. Hermod returned to Asgard with this message, and the gods sent messengers throughout the worlds to spread the news. All things wept for Baldur, except for one giantess named Tok, who was in truth Loki in disguise. She coldly refused to mourn, sealing Baldur's fate to remain in Hel's cold and shadowy grasp forever. Thus, Baldur's light would no longer grace the living world. Loki is depicted as more of a hindrance than a help to the other gods. After orchestrating the death of Baldur, he maliciously slandered the gods at every chance. Eventually, the gods decided they could no longer tolerate his behavior and set out to capture him. Loki fled far from Asgard, retreating to a high mountain where he built a house with 4 doors to keep watch for his pursuers. By day, he transformed into a salmon and concealed himself beneath a nearby waterfall. By night, he sat by a fire, weaving a fishing net to catch food. Odin, with his keen insight, discovered Loki's hiding place. When Loki noticed the gods approaching, he tossed his net into the fire and took refuge in the stream, transforming into salmon to hide his whereabouts. The gods found the smoldering net and concluded that Loki had changed into the form of a fish to evade capture. They used the twine he had been weaving to make their own net and proceeded to the stream. Despite numerous attempts to catch him, Loki eluded them until he made a desperate leap downstream toward the sea. In that moment, he was caught by Thor, who held the struggling salmon tightly by its tail. This is said to be why salmon have slender tails today. Once captured in his true form, Loki was taken to a cave. There the gods punished him by turning one of his sons into a wolf, which then killed his brother, leaving the cave floor strewn with entrails. Loki was bound to 3 rocks with his slain son's entrails, transformed into iron chains. Skadi placed a venomous snake above him, allowing poison to drip onto his face. Loki's devoted wife Sigyn stayed by him, holding a bowl to catch the venom. However, when the bowl filled, she had to leave to empty it, causing poison to fall on Loki's, her face making him convulse. These convulsions were said to cause earthquakes in Midgard, the realm of humans. This was Loki's fate alongside Sigyn, until, as prophesied, he would break free during Ragnarok to aid the giants in their quest to destroy the cosmos. After Baldur's death, Odin seeks vengeance and learns by powerful Finnish magician named Runes.to that only a son born of Rinda can fulfill this task. His obsession leads him down a dark path of manipulation. Initially, Odin attempts to woo Rinda, but she rejects him. Undeterred, he resorts to darker means, using runes to drive her into madness. Disguised as a healer, he convinces Rinda's father to allow him to treat her, leading to her being bound and ultimately forced by Odin. This act strips Rinda of her autonomy, highlighting the cruelty of Odin's quest for vengeance. The child born from this violation is Vali, destined to avenge Baldur, but Rinda's story fades after his birth. She becomes a mere vessel for divine will, her suffering overshadowed by Odin's goals. Rinda's tale raises important questions about power and morality. Odin, often seen as wise, reveals a ruthless side, willing to violate basic principles of consent for revenge. While some may argue that his actions serve a greater cosmic purpose, the sheer cruelty of the story stands out among other myths, which typically involve heroic battles rather than personal violations. Ultimately, Rinda remains a haunting figure in Norse mythology, her suffering rendered invisible in the pursuit of vengeance. Her story challenges us to reflect on the moral implications of these ancient tales and the often unrecognized victims left in their wake. The beginning of Ragnarok was marked by roosters crowing, warning the 9 realms. The golden rooster in Asgard woke Odin's warriors. The dun rooster roused the spirits of Helheim, and the red rooster Fjalar called in Jotunheim, the land of giants. Meanwhile, the fierce hellhound Garm bellowed at the gates of Helheim. The sons of the wolf Fenris brought about a never-ending winter. Skuld devoured the sun, while Hati consumed the moon, staining the skies red. Stars will fade from sight, and darkness will shroud the world like ashes or mist. This will be the dreadful Fimbul winter, an endless time of bitter snow, biting winds, and a bone-chilling cold that will make breathing painful and freeze tears in your eyes. No relief will come with spring, summer, or autumn, only winter, one after another. Following this, massive earthquakes will ravage the land. Mountains will crumble, trees will fall, and any remaining habitations will be destroyed. People will suffer from hunger, cold, and anger. Huge battles will erupt worldwide. Brothers will fight brothers, fathers will harm their sons, and families will turn on each other. It will be a time of harsh winds, where people act like wolves, preying on one another, behaving no better than wild animals. Twilight will descend, cities will crumble into ruins, burning briefly before collapsing into ash and ruin. The earthquakes will be so intense that all chains and restraints will break apart, releasing everything held captive. Fenris and Loki, both once imprisoned by the gods, broke free, preparing for battle. In the sea, the serpent Jörmungandr thrashed, trying to reach land, causing massive waves. The trembling of the world will signal the gathering of a formidable army of giants and monsters, ready to rise against the gods. A protective barrier that has kept the first giants confined in Muspelheim, the realm of fire, since the dawn of creation will begin to crack. This will free the mighty fire giant Surtur, who has been patiently waiting at the entrance, ready to unleash his forces. With his blazing sword, he will ignite much of the world. Meanwhile, Loki will journey to Helheim to reunite with his daughter Hel. The earthquakes will have released the ship Naglfar, constructed from the nails of the deceased. Together with Hel, her fearsome guard dog Garm, and an army of the dishonored dead, Loki will set sail toward Asgard. In the waters surrounding Midgard, Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, will feel restless and emerge, causing massive tidal waves with his enormous form. He will also unleash toxic venom upon the land and sky. Fenrir, the great wolf, will rampage across the world, consuming everything in his path. The ship, Naglfar, crafted from the fingernails of the dead, emerged ominously from the waves, helmed by the giant Hrym. In a dark alliance, Hel aided Loki by providing him with a second vessel, which carried Surtur and his fellow fire giants to the battlefield. These dark forces will converge on Asgard, gathering for battle on the plains of Vigridr. Heimdall, the watchful sentinel of Asgard, will blow his horn to announce the approach of the giants. Odin will descend to the Well of Wisdom in Niflheim to seek counsel from his wise friend Mimir. He will then rally his army of brave warriors from Valhalla. Baldur and Hodr will be released from Helheim to join the gods in their fight. The gods resolve to engage in battle, fully aware of the prophecies that foretell their grim fate. They equip themselves for the clash on the battlefield known as Vigrid, meaning plain where battle surges. In the epic saga, Odin leads the charge with a gleaming armor and a golden helmet, accompanied by Thor wielding his mighty hammer, Mjolnir. As they enter the battlefield, the final confrontation looms ahead. Odin advances towards Fenrir, the colossal wolf of unimaginable size, with his spear, Gungnir, firmly grasped in his hand. Meanwhile, Thor, noticing Odin's target, he speeds towards the Midgard serpent, ready to engage it with his iron-clad gauntlet and hammer. Frey confronts Surtur, the fiery and monstrous being wielding a massive burning sword. Despite Frey's valiant efforts, he falls first among the Aesir, outmatched by the relentless flames of Surtur's sword. In his final moments, Frey regrets losing the sword he once gifted for love, a sword that could have been his salvation, the D. Battlefield echoes with the clamor of battle as Odin's noble warriors, the Einherjar, clash fiercely with the undead forces led by Loki. The fearsome hellhound Garm, though smaller than Fenrir, poses a grave threat, breaking free to wreak havoc among the warriors. Tyr, the one-handed god, bravely faces Garm in a desperate struggle, culminating in a fatal confrontation where both meet their end, locked in a deadly embrace. Thor fulfills his long-awaited destiny by vanquishing the Midgard serpent, crushing its skull with a powerful blow from his hammer. However, in a tragic turn as the serpent falls lifeless, it unleashes a final act of vengeance, spraying Thor with its deadly venom, ultimately leading to the demise of the Thunder God. In the ultimate showdown, Odin faces the massive and formidable Fenrir, a wolf of unimaginable size, surpassing even the sun and the moon in magnitude. Despite Odin's courage and skill, Fenrir swiftly devours him, extinguishing the presence of the great All-Father forever. Witnessing his father's fall, Vidar, the dependable and silent god, steps forward with resolve. As Fenrir revels in Odin's demise, Vidar takes action, thrusting his foot into the wolf's lower jaw. Vidar's unique footwear, crafted from discarded leather scraps accumulated over time, proves to be the key in subduing Fenrir. By leveraging this makeshift shoe, Vidar immobilizes the wolf's lower jaw, rendering it powerless to harm. With a decisive move, Vidar seizes Fenrir's upper jaw, tearing the beast's mouth asunder and avenging his father's death in a final act of retribution. On the battleground known as Vigrid, a catastrophic clash unfolds between the gods and the frost giants, each faction meeting its end in a cataclysmic struggle. The undead forces from Hell meet their final demise alongside the noble Einherjar warriors, all falling for the last time on the frozen ground under the lifeless, misty sky, destined never to rise again and engage in battle. Amidst the chaos of battle, Loki and Heimdall stand on the desolate field of Vigrid. Loki, bloodied and fierce, faces Heimdall, the stalwart guardian of the gods, with a sword wet with blood in hand. As they approach each other, Loki provokes Heimdall with taunts, relishing in the god's downfall. However, Heimdall remains composed, unmoved by Loki's words, and launches into a fierce combat, their swords clashing in a brutal struggle. Memories of their past conflicts resurface as they fight, including their ancient rivalry over the Brising's necklace. The battle escalates, each blow bringing them closer to their inevitable end until both warriors fall, gravely wounded on the blood-soaked ground. In his final moments, Loki claims victory in the face of destruction, but Heimdall, with a defiant smile, imparts a profound truth about survival and renewal amid devastation. As Loki fades away, silenced in death, Heimdall's unwavering gaze symbolizes the eternal cycle of life and death, heralding the dawn of a new era amidst the ruins of the old world. Surtur, the ancient burning giant, raises his fiery sword towards the heavens, signaling the beginning of the end. A deafening roar, akin to forests ablaze, fills the air as the world ignites in Surtur's flames. The oceans evaporate into steam as the final fires rage and then fade, leaving a snowfall of black ash from the sky. In the dusk where Loki and Heimdall once lay side by side, only grey ash heaps remain on the scorched earth, the smoke blending with the morning mist. All traces of the living and the dead, the gods' aspirations and the valor of their warriors, dissolve into ash, a somber testament to the annihilation that has befallen them. Subsequently, the swelling ocean engulfs the ashes, sweeping across the land, erasing all remnants of life under the sunless sky. Thus concludes the world's fate, consumed by ash and flood, enveloped in darkness and ice, a poignant depiction of the gods' ultimate destiny. However, from this abyss the earth rises anew, and the surviving Aesir gods gather at the field of Idavöllr to begin the monumental task of rebuilding. Among the survivors are Magni and Modi, Thor's sons, who inherit their father's mighty hammer. Their presence is significant, symbolizing the continuation of their father's legacy. They are joined by Vidar, Odin's son, who avenged his father by slaying Fenrir. Late to the battle due to their entrapment in Helheim, Balder and Hoder return to join the living gods in the restoration effort. Another survivor is Honir, a lesser-known Aesir god associated with the creation of mankind, who now casts divination shards to guide their efforts. Njord, a god of the Vanir, also emerges from the devastation, alongside the daughter of Sul, the sun goddess who steps into her mother's role. Amidst the ruins, two human survivors, Lif and Lifthrasir, whose names mean life and striving for life, remain hidden in a forest called Hodmimis Holt. They are destined to become a new Adam and Eve, tasked with repopulating the world and ensuring the continuation of Norse humanity. Together they represent hope and renewal in the wake of destruction. The new Norse world will closely resemble the old one, with the surviving gods settling in Idavöllr, which remains untouched by destruction. Here they will recreate Asgard's splendor, highlighted by Gimli, a magnificent hall with a golden roof. In contrast, a new Helheim named Nastrond, or Shore of Corpses, will feature doors facing north, welcoming cold winds. Its walls are made of writhing snakes that pour venom into a river running through the realm. Within Nastrond, the dragon Nidhogger awaits to feast on the souls of thieves and murderers, encapsulating the balance of beauty and darkness in the new world. Baldur's countenance brightens with a radiant smile akin to the emergence of the sun from behind clouds. With grace and purpose, he extends his hand, reaching down to make his initial move on the board. Don't forget to like this video